Mondays with Mike.
Right?
The Los Angeles fires. They cover weather a lot on NBC, but I think that legitimately this week there were huge weather events. And one of them that I sort of classify as a weather event is the Los Angeles fires. So let's look at this story about the Los Angeles fires. A link to the following video can be found on the Mondays with Mike podcast website. This would be episode 2, video 1. On January 23rd, Lester Holt began. Now to the still intense firefight in Southern California to get new wildfires under control, with tens of thousands still evacuated, and a new worry with rain in the forecast. Liz Kreutz reports from Malibu. Then Liz Kreutz says, tonight, relentless Santa Ana winds sparking multiple new fires across Southern California, forcing firefighters into what seems like a volatile game of whack-a-mole. From Ventura County to San Diego to Los Angeles, where overnight a brush fire ignited near the famous Getty Center and closing in on one of the city's busiest highways and prompting evacuation warnings in Bel Air. Crews knocking the fire, while also waging a massive air and ground attack to get a handle on the Hughes fire in North LA, forcing 30,000 people from their homes. A firefighter says, we were able to get a lot of personnel and equipment on scene in a relatively short amount of time. Liz Kreutz continues, across Southern California, 10 million facing dangerous fire conditions with up to 70-mile-per-hour winds, but rain now in the forecast after months of bone-dry conditions. She asks a firefighter, rain, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Firefighter number 2 replies, right now what's predicted looks like a good thing because it's not a lot, but we're not taking any chances. Liz Kreutz continues, the rain is bringing concerns about mudslides with unstable land in the burn scars and all this toxic debris. Crews clearing debris, installing concrete barriers, and giving out sandbags to shore up vulnerable areas. Someone identified as an Altadena resident says, if the rain pounds for a significant period of time, there will be a slide. The story goes on. It can be found. The link can be found at our website. Very sad. You have these fires. They displace tens of thousands of people, tens of millions under alert.
Sure, it's going to be the biggest story of 2025 for quite some time because it's not going away. This is one of the wealthiest real estate in the country, if not the world. And with what Trump is saying about FEMA in terms of changing it or abolishing FEMA, means that this is a political story that's not going away. As goes California, so goes the nation in some respects, because California contributes a significant amount of money in taxes and receives less money from taxes in terms of federal supports, meaning that if the state of California, for whatever reason, decides to make a concerted effort to lobby around the country for Congress, they have the money to do it. They have people who have a lot of money and platforms and various types of celebrity and you name it that could just spend all of 2025 and all of 2026 just talking every day about all the people who didn't want to help California. And they have a much bigger microphone and a much bigger megaphone than smaller states have in terms of the political impact they can have for fundraising, for getting access to media, you name it. And so this is a huge story in terms of the political ramifications if aid isn't given to help people. But it's also a huge story in the sense that it's a giant fire. It's just getting started, right? This is not the usual wildfire season since we're still in the middle of winter. When the wildfire season starts in full swing, it may get even worse. It's going to be a bumpy ride for 2025. How prepared are the states that are going to get hit by wildfires? Because if this is the test run, they weren't as prepared as they could have been. They didn't have enough trucks out. They didn't have enough water. They didn't have enough water in the reservoir. Those stories of the hydrants not working, that was a huge boondoggle in terms of political competency, right? There's also serious questions about, building codes and preparedness on the part of homeowners. Like, why are these very wealthy homeowners and communities not making serious investments on their own? Why are they depending on a last resort like firefighting when you fight fires as they happen? Where's all the
Yeah.
preventative measures that they could do
Yeah.
as a group, right? Because ultimately, zoning policy and local policies are made by cities and by communities. Billions of dollars in damage that could have been prevented by millions of dollars of spending is bad foresight by any
Yeah.
measure. Probably why the
And they
insurance
say,
companies backed
and
out.
If you told a California resident that, so you're probably talking about California and the city writ large, because if you told a California resident that, they might say, well, I pay 13% of my taxes, toward California, and sales tax 8, 10, something like that percent. That should be how I prepare. They might say that,
It's
right?
an all hands on deck issue, right?
Yeah,
It affects everybody, and it affects everybody in a big way, especially when the insurance companies
yeah,
stop covering. The responsibility ultimately then falls on whoever bears the cost at the end of it. If no insurer is covering your house, then you, the homeowner or the landlord, have to spend the money and the resources to actually stop a fire from destroying your home. Could it
yeah,
be a really dumb solution, like a 100-foot wall of dirt? Maybe, right? There's a 1,400-mile berm in the Sahara, that they've built over many years. Why can't we just have giant walls that
yeah,
surround all of these cities? Like, what's the impediment? And if the impediment was something like, oh, it affected my home value or my view or some kind of NIMBY thing, like, oh, we don't want, lower cost houses. Well, all the houses are gone, or most of the houses are gone. There should be some consideration that a slight reduction in home values might be worth a massive reduction in home values for something that is preventable, right? They know that they're in areas that wildfires can occur and that these
yeah.
winds, the Santa Ana winds, happen. And they know that high winds and low rain equals the possibility of fire. So the issue sucks in a lot of ways for a lot of reasons. One is that they're not holding their elected leaders accountable in elections to the degree they might need to in terms of, maybe they've grown too comfortable in their positions because it's been the same, leadership year after year. But the problem with that
Safe
is
seats,
that
yeah.
you don't, if your political leaders are a little too, I don't know, distracted or just not taking it seriously, like it's a war against nature, they
yeah.
don't treat it like it's a war against nature. And I mean, like that's
Which
the
society, in a certain sense, is.
I
Yeah,
I mean society, all of like
Yeah.
farmland, you name it, right? It's always
Yeah.
trying to keep something in a place against the forces that might, work to displace it. Tornadoes,
Hmm.
hurricanes, floods, you
Yeah.
name it. Volcanoes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like if they know a volcano is going to erupt in Mount St. Helens, maybe don't live right next to, the volcano that's erupting. I was reading
Yeah.
about the guy who he had a lodge like not that far away from the crater. He's like, I'm not going to leave.
just like you said, these are single family homes, and they are in a very hot place. They're in what would otherwise be a desert. The plain of Los Angeles, maybe not quite, but they're pretty darn close. There's a lot of aqueducts there, and they're doing a lot to wage a war against nature. Places like Phoenix, places like Yuma, it's too hot. Do you think that, planners should favor more dense developments to pool resources and frankly probably developments not in such a disaster zone?
Well, here's an issue that we've seen. I'm thinking about that hurricane that hit Texas way back when in the floodplains, where some homes got flooded, some didn't, because people were building in floodplains when they were told not to. Is that part of it's an issue of enforcement? I agree that there should be much more investment in fire resistant building, even if it looks ugly, much more investment in fire prevention uh, things that can happen that didn't clearly happen and could have and probably should have. Like fire has been with humanity for a very long time. Humanity
Yeah.
has figured out ways somewhere in the world for how to not have all of their homes burned down all at
Hmm.
once. Figured it out, and the question is, why haven't the people with a huge amount of resources not also figured it out? What was going on there? Is it just
Yeah, total system failure. Yeah.
that's because that's the question. I would understand if they didn't have the resources, if there just wasn't, money lying around. But these groups have the resources. Some of them
Yes.
hired private firefighting companies, right? with their own water trucks. Those structures stood. Okay, why couldn't they
Hmm.
all hire
Yeah.
collective? I guess the assumption would be, oh, well, we're already paying for, firefighters through taxes, but
But
that's
it's their home. It's their most valuable asset. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you hear these tragic stories of people losing their entire life savings. It's like, okay, what could have happened before it happened that could have better prevented this from happening? Like, this is
Yeah.
really, really tragic.
Hmm.
And I just think there needs to be way more discussion in elections in particular, because that's where you get politicians to actually be held accountable to their words in terms of their promises of what they're actually going to do in a meaningful way to stop fires. Because if you just keep
Yeah.
passing the buck, oh, it's the federal government, oh, it's the state government, oh, it's the county, who's actually doing it?
Right. Trump went down to California last Friday, and he said there can be no golden age without the Golden State.
So there can be no golden age without the Golden State. It's a great state. It's a fantastic place.
This echoes what you said about how, as goes California, so goes the nation in certain respects. The press conference with him and Mayor Bass. What'd you think of it?
It was odd. It was certainly an unusual press conference. It's not going away. The wildfire season in California is in the middle of the year, and so these issues aren't being resolved in an adequate fashion. It doesn't seem like there's a sense of urgency to prevent huge amounts of damage to structures. I heard a lot of bickering over which agencies are the worst in terms of the amount of time it takes for them to grant permits. And I heard some disagreements about the nature of emergency powers between Trump and Bass of how safe is safe enough.
So, at the time of this podcast edit, this video is under video 2 of episode 2 on the website. I'm going to put it in video 3 with the correct timestamp. This is a press conference discussion between President Trump, Mayor Bass, Mayor of Los Angeles Bass, and the locals, and it's very informative. I very much encourage you to watch the video. I always encourage you to watch the videos, but in this particular case, I think it's quite telling. And I think that my transcription of this is going to be rather comic, so let's see. Trump asks a resident, "Is that local? You gotta do. I don't want to be the only one to give you permits, like in one day, and then I find out that the cities, the towns, and the state are not going to give you permits because, and you know the problem with permits, it only takes one, foil your attempt to build or clean up. You might need 7 different permits. You shouldn't have or need any at this point. You, governments, should just let them build. And you know, you're only as good as the weakest one permit. So if you have one that's going to hold you up, but the others are going to give you it in 24 hours, it's not going to help you very much. So they have to work on that." People from the audience say things I can't exactly hear, but it sounds like they said, "We were told last night 6 or 18 months. Trump." That's what everyone said. Mayor Bass. "Well, and let me just tell you that we are going to do everything we can, slashing regulations, expediting everything, so that people can begin the process right away. You know, we have the Disaster Recovery Center on Pico and Westwood. We have buildings and safety there. People are already contacting the local agencies. We're bringing our city departments together so that people don't get caught in the loop of going from one room to the next. We want them all to be in the same room so that you can get busy rebuilding ASAP." People in the audience say things like, "We have to clear the lots." Mayor Bass. "Absolutely. Yes, and we will clear the lots. Absolutely. In the city and in the county. We are working together. Both levels of government are working in unity." A resident objects. They are probably saying they were told last night 6 months. Trump. 6 months is no good. Bass. "And the number one thing that we are going to do immediately, and you will see this happen, is to clear out the debris. And we're concerned right now over the weekend because of the potential rain, but we are going to move as fast as we can. But we want you to be safe. We want you to be back in your homes immediately. Trump, but the people are willing to clean out their own debris. Bass, yes, and they can. At this point, the two talk over each other for a little bit. Trump, it doesn't cost a lot. You should let them do it. Bass, no, they can do it. Trump, because by the time you hire contractors, Bass, right. Trump, it's going to be 2 years. Bass, if a family. Trump, people are willing to get a dumpster and do it themselves and clean it out. There's not that much left. It's all incinerated. Bass, that's right. Trump, and it's just going to take a long time if you contractors or the government can do some of it, but a lot of these people, I know that guy right there that's talking. I know my people. He'll be on that thing tonight throwing the stuff away, and your site it'll look perfect within 24 hours. And that's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to wait around for 7 months till the city hires some demolition contract that's going to charge him $25,000 to do his lot. I think you have emergency powers just like I do, and I'm exercising my emergency powers. You have to exercise them also. Bass, I did exercise them. I signed an emergency declaration. Trump, you have a very powerful emergency power, and you can do everything within 24 hours. Bass, yes, and if individuals want to clear out their property, they can. Some people from the crowd object that they're not allowed into their homes, I believe. Bass, well, yes, but you know that you will be able to go back soon. Someone asks when. We think within a week. Trump, that's a long time, a week. I'll be honest, to me, everyone's standing in front of their house, they want to go to work, and they're not allowed to do it. Bass, and the most important thing is for people to be safe. Trump, they're safe. They're safe. You know what? They're not safe. They're not safe right now. They're going to be much safer. He probably means once they can return to their homes, but he continues, a week is actually a long time, the way I look at it. I've watched hundreds of people standing in front of their lots, and they're not allowed to go in. It's all burned. It's gone. It's done. Nothing's going to happen to it. It's not going to burn anymore. There's nothing to burn. There's almost nothing to burn, and they want to go in. The people are all over the place. They're standing, and I say, why aren't you going in? We're trying to get a permit. And that permit's going to take them, everyone said 18 months. You said 18 months. You said 18 months last. People talk, saying it was last night. And that was last night.
On that particular argument, I think Trump's wrong, that it's not safe immediately to go to any of these sites. Because if you listen later in the press conference, they have an individual from the Palisade fires who's talking about how they had to still scoop out soil that was toxic, right? That was poisonous to the environment, and they had to test that toxicity. It's not a great idea to walk into a zone of devastation immediately to try and clean up materials, because some of those materials may be very hazardous and they need to be disposed of in certain ways.
Right. Yeah, it seems to me that this exchange is sort of at the root of competing visions for America, one of which is at this moment headed by Trump, and another one which doesn't exactly have a figurehead. You and I talked about, and you advocated for fire breaks to be built around cities and settlements, and for that to be done with some degree of urgency. So that's one kind of urgency. But then the kind of urgency that Trump was talking about was, it's going to take them 18 months? No, that's too long. 6 months? That's too long. How about a week? Well, a week really is a long time. So these seem antithetical. There were a lot of people in the crowd who seemed to agree with Trump's point of view. Do you think they are representative of the California view at large, or do you think those were just the people who came to the particular meeting?
I think they were the loudest in the room and that they were invited to the meeting on purpose to create a sense of unanimity of I don't think that it reflects the will of the people so much for California because that's more through how the legislature acts. But I do think there is dissatisfaction in California related to regulations in terms of building codes and the significant number of permits you need to have to build anything in California right now. There's a lack of affordable housing. One of the huge impediments to having affordable housing is that developers do not want to wait 10 years, 15 years, however long it is, apparently a much greater length of time than other places in the country to build homes because it costs a lot of money to build a home and you want to see a return on that investment in your lifetime. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, agree. You have on one side of the spectrum, if the developers can build cheap, sell immediately, then that's the most profit and the ability to do it because they can then roll their investment into the next thing, which would be good for them if they could do that business quickly but also do it right. And can the two coexist? Then the opposite point of view would be building sustainably, building, like you say, with fire resistant material, even if it's ugly, and stone's not ugly. There are various options, so it's not all ugly. But building right. Not necessarily building slowly, but if it takes some time, taking the time to do so. Do you think Karen Bass represents our point of view in that, or do you think she's somewhere in the middle? Is anybody standing over here with us, or is it just, or do they just stand for the accumulation of regulations as in the status quo?
So Trump raised an interesting point that I thought is worth mentioning that if you wait a long time for the city to provide the debris clearing, for instance, it's someone that they've contracted that the homeowner or property owner has to pay for to clear the debris. And the issue there was that there are stakeholders deeply invested in making money from having a what might be called a monopoly on emergency management, emergency response, and the consequences after a natural disaster occurs. So I'm talking construction companies, I'm talking debris clearing companies, and it appears that there's some bias towards making people wealthier through employment, through especially unionized labor in California, which this would be for construction and a couple of others at the expense of those property owners, right? That because those property owners would still have to pay, property taxes and any number of other costs associated with just an empty lot that they have to pay by virtue of having it. The city gets more money and it's at the expense of homeowners. And they get more money in two ways. They get more money through the taxes, right, of their approved contractors, and they get more money through the longer lag time of the property. It doesn't look good. It's not respecting the property owner's right to choose their own contractors to clear debris. It's a whole disagreement there that I think Trump did raise an interesting point. But there's heavy disagreement over who should be the regulators. If it's federal regulators, right now there's a government-wide hiring freeze, so that's not happening. And there's that email that went out to buy out all 2 million or whatever federal employees. So it sends a weird message: train for this role, get paid, apply for this job in the specific role that only the government will hire you for. And oh, by the way, we're not hiring anyone for any of these roles and we're trying to push people out the door. It sends a weirdly inconsistent message. But yes, it would be great if we lived in a world where situations could adapt, that you have enough regulators on hand to push the process through. But that's where Trump was talking about those emergency powers, because you can waive those inspections, right? And you can do it after the fact. It just, there are consequences to waiving inspections,
Yeah.
right? Serious consequences, environmental consequences. There's problems if you don't inspect for like, pipes and water and sewage and electricity and all those things that you have to make sure everything's up to code so that it all works, right? You have to make sure
Yeah.
you don't actually like waive the things that make a community a community.
If it doesn't work, you've been sold a lemon.
Yes, that's that's the whole problem right now. Is if they want everything back the way it was, that's going to take a really long time because of the number of permits that they have involved that you have to get everything approved. And code is great because you don't want houses that fall apart. You want the materials to actually be the materials that they're supposed to be, and you want to make sure that the rebuild effort isn't its own kind of man-made disaster. Yeah, it's a tough question.
Yeah, it is. It reminds me a lot of the so-called suburban Ponzi scheme pushed by developers in the 1950s. It is so called by the organization Strong Towns. Have you heard of this?
No, I have.
Okay, it's this idea how they built suburbia in the 1950s, and they sold the houses like 10,000 bucks per house. Of course, there's inflation, but still it would be an extraordinarily affordable house these days, and they were on big lots, but the value of the house and the property taxes it thus rendered was nothing close to what it takes to maintain the sewers, maintain the electrical systems, maintain the roads especially. So if you interpret it a certain way, it might have been a Ponzi scheme. Now, if the property tax revenue goes up, then it wasn't a Ponzi scheme. So can you really call it that? But in certain places they didn't. That not enough anyway. Not in the Rust Belt and stuff. So it reminds me of that.
It's definitely a complicated topic of what's going on with California, but it's not only going to be California that deals with these issues because of how insurers are pulling out of various markets. So Florida is having issues right now, insurance not covering for flood damage and hurricanes, and there's these places around the country that are definitely going to face real difficulties in rebuilding without serious help.
So, yeah, we got less than a minute here left, but this was a terrific discussion.
Great.
And thank you for all your perspectives, and thanks for making this happen. We'll see you next week here on Mondays with Mike.
All right.